necessary trouble? Okay, and all right. We've got for the 2022 legislative session preview, we will have the legislative process in criminal justice reform and impacting the redistricting in 2022, the electoral races and candidate recruitment for 2022, the electoral races and the candidate recruitment, necessary trouble, about what's happening with necessary trouble, as well as updates from our working committees. So with that being said, at this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to, okay, y'all, bear with me. All right, so now I would like to turn the meeting over. Our theme this year, I'm sorry, our theme this year is preparing for actions in 2022. So with that said, I'm going to turn this session over to Becky to introduce our first segment, and that is Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark.
Thank you, PJ. Thank you, PJ. It's really so lovely to see everybody. It feels like a big lift and a boost in this new year. I am so happy to be the one who gets to introduce Jasmine. And lots of us who have been around in necessary trouble for a while know Jasmine from her first run in 2018. Actually, we were running in 2017. It was really, so anyway, so let me say a little bit about Jasmine. For those who don't know, she is both a scientist as well as being a representative in the state legislature. She has a PhD in microbiology from Emory. She is a senior lecturer at the Woodruff School of Nursing. She was first elected in 2018. Lots of people on this Zoom call worked on that election. She was re-elected in 2020. Lots of people on this call worked on that election. And she is up for re-election this year as well, and has been unceasingly a voice of reason and science and sanity in the state, in the Gold Dome, at times when there wasn't a whole lot of reason or sanity. And so we are so grateful that she's agreed to come and talk to us about what to expect in the 2022 session. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Becky, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you always, Necessary Trouble, for all of the work that you do to help me get elected, as well as to help other amazing people get elected. You all are a force to be reckoned with, and I really do appreciate everything that you all do and just how much you all are engaged in the political process, in the legislative process, and the election process as a whole. So thank you very much. I do want to apologize in advance. My dog, Stella, is being very needy today, and she has decided to join the Zoom as well. And so I'm going to try to keep her down, but she wants a lot of attention from mommy today for some reason. Not really sure. As soon as I get on Zoom, she's like, pay attention to me. So let's talk a little bit about the 2022 session. So we are fresh off the heels of the 2021 special session on redistricting. So we have new maps. And if you all followed that process, you know that quite a few things have changed in the maps. Here in Gwinnett County, we had a bit of a battle with someone trying to come in and make some major changes to our local maps. And actually right now, one of the things that you can expect during the 2022 legislative session is local redistricting. So we did the congressional redistricting and we did the state redistricting during special session, but we have not done our county boards of commissioners and our county boards of education yet. And there also might be some municipal redistricting as well. It just depends. But for the most part, every county, if they have districts as a part of their board, and they're not just at-large districts, but they have actual districts, they will be going through their redistricting process as well. So this is going to be a big deal going into this 2022 session. It's probably one of the major things that we will deal with early in the session, along with the things that we already deal with, things like the budget and just ramping up for the session as people start to introduce bills. So that's one thing that we can all expect, is to see a lot of talk about maps and lines and drawing of lines and redistricting at the local level. For a lot of us representatives and even some senators, this is our first time going through this process. So it is a steep learning curve, but it's one that we are all ready to tackle. And we have been doing a lot of education on this to be prepared. In Gwinnett, I will say, having seen what they did during special session, we have even more of an uphill battle, because not only are we preparing for the traditional ways of doing redistricting, but here in Gwinnett County, we're also preparing for the political trickery and all the loopholes and things that could be used to undermine any democratic processes, as what we saw during redistricting. So that's that. Outside of redistricting, we also have a governor, Governor Kemp, who is running for re-election and has fallen out of favor with a portion of his party. And in doing so, he has decided that he needs to get back in their good graces. Well, in trying to get back in their good graces, what is happening is he is proposing some pretty extreme legislation, pretty harmful legislation, as a way to tell the far right parts of his base that he is Trumpy enough for them to vote for him. And so he has decided to endorse the constitutional, and I'm using air quotes, constitutional carry, which would basically allow for people to conceal carry guns anywhere and everywhere without a permit. This bill has been filed every session, usually by one of the more far right leaning members, or sometimes the libertarian leaning members of the chamber, and has always been considered a fringe bill. No one signs on to it, and it never gets a hearing and never comes up for a vote. So the fringe bill that is normally basically the joke of the session has now been endorsed by the governor, because he wants to get into good graces with Trump supporters. So we are going to actually have to fight that. It is going to boil down to talking about how more guns does not make us more safe. But again, it's going to be an uphill battle, especially since the governor himself has endorsed it. So it will not see the same hurdles that it has seen in the past, even though the bill is exactly the same. Along with that, whoever wins in the Republican primary knows that they're going to have to go up against an amazing force in Stacey Abrams. And so what we can expect to also see from their side are bills that restrict voting. We already saw SB 202. They are going to double down on some of those things, and they're going to try to make it even harder. And they're going to try their best to use what they put in SB 202 to the test. So things like taking over election boards and restructuring election boards. We are seeing across the state a lot of places closing down in rural Georgia, closing down a lot of precincts. And that is going to, affect a lot of voters. And in the legislature, we have to be mindful that bills that undermine or make voting less accessible are likely to come across our desk as well. And a third thing that we can count on is attack on reproductive rights. So this is something that we see all the time. But again, now we have a governor who's trying to prove that he is Trumpy enough to get those Trump supporter votes. And so we will see those attacks on reproductive rights as well. Along with the governor, we also have other Republicans either running for higher office or just who just feel the need to introduce ridiculous bills. We can expect to see a copycat bill of the Texas SB 8 bill, which basically encourages vigilantism when it comes to people seeking abortion care. Georgia already told the world, told the state, told the country how they feel about vigilantism when we repealed citizens arrest. We already rejected vigilantism. So SB 8 is a completely counter to that, in that we are now saying, no, we do want citizens to try to enforce, quote, laws that are unconstitutional. So, but we can expect to see this because people in positions of power, floor leaders, and caucus leaders on the Republican side are the ones introducing these bills. We also know that they will be introducing a bill to ban ballot drop boxes. They are also planning to introduce bills that will ban certain books from being in our school libraries. They will also have bills banning comprehensive sex education, and bills banning things like CRT, which is just code for banning history, because we already do not teach CRT, but the way they word these bills, it will basically make it to where we can't even talk about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, the Trail of Tears, and other parts of history, because it might make some people feel ashamed about that part of history. So that's what we're up against right now. We are also going to see things. We already know that some far-right groups are planning on introducing legislation on day one to counter the FDA increasing access to the medical abortion pill. So a little bit about that, just so people are clear. This does not mean that you can just go on Amazon and get the abortion pill. That's not what that ruling said, or that new rule says. It just says that if you have a prescription, you do not have to go pick up that prescription in person. It can be mailed to you. This just increases access because it allows for people to get access to their medicine without having to go physically into a building. And especially since here in Georgia, we have laws that say that pharmacists can deny you medication if it goes against their religion. This is one way that we can get past that hurdle and people can still get access to their medicines. So these are things that we have to look out for. And so those are, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of my legislative priorities. I think these are pretty important. One thing I want to talk about is the counter to this idea that we need to ban comprehensive sex education. I have two bills. One that will make sex education medically accurate, because I do think that information is powerful. And we have seen across the globe in other countries that when you actually teach age-appropriate sex education, it actually meets the objectives that the people who want to just teach abstinence-only religion-based sex education in our public schools, it actually meets those goals better than what the abstinence only crowd is proposing. I also have a second sex education bill that would require that we teach about consent in sex education. right now, that is not a requirement here in Georgia. There are several states that do teach consent as a part of sex education, that they are required to. These states have both Republican and Democratic governors and Republican and Democratic legislators. So this is an idea that crosses party lines and should be nonpartisan. And so I'm hoping that we can make some headway on this, and that we can actually get something that is helpful to everyone when it comes to educating our adolescents. And in the case of consent, can actually lead to a reduction in the number of sexual assaults in college atmospheres and in adulthood. Other bills that I plan on introducing. So previously I had introduced a safe gun storage bill. I plan to reintroduce that this session as well. I think it's really important that we promote responsible gun ownership. So I am not a fan of people conceal carrying. Honestly, it makes me feel a little weird when people are open carrying in the grocery store and Walmart anyway. But conceal carry makes me even more nervous. But that said, safe gun storage is all about making sure that guns are stored in an appropriate manner to keep them out of the hands of people who should not have them. That includes children, that includes people who, break into your home or things like that. So safe gun storage is really about that. We have had a tragic number of children reported having been killed or killing other children because they got their hands on a gun that they never should have been able to have access to. Another thing that's really important to me is mental health. And I am going to be continue to push for more funding for mental health here in Georgia, specifically during the budget process, and making sure that the DBHDD, which is the state department that handles mental health here in Georgia, has adequate funding. I also have signed on to a bill with Representative Shelley Hutchinson, which would introduce parity when it comes to mental health coverage, so that people who have, when people have health insurance, to make sure that their mental health is also being covered. If they're seeking mental health help, that is also being covered. That's the very vague way of describing it, but it's all about parity and just making mental health care affordable for everyone. I don't know if anyone on this call has ever tried to seek mental health care, but it can be pretty daunting. It can be pretty difficult, and it can be pretty costly. And that's one thing that we would like to fix here in Georgia. Another bill that I plan to introduce, and this is a bill that was brought to me by students, and so it is a bill for students, is adolescent mental health screening through the schools. Similar to how when you enroll your kid in school, you have to show that they've had their eyes checked and they've had their ears checked. And this is just another screening that can be used to make sure that we are catching students who might need mental health care resources early. And so again, this was brought to me by students who saw a need to have this happen. And so I am happy to introduce that legislation this session. I also plan to support, if not sponsor, a pro-reproductive rights bill. It is a counter to all the anti-reproductive rights bill. It will be an omnibus bill, very large, that fixes the Georgia code to make reproductive rights or to grant reproductive rights to individuals, because it should be their right to have the ability to make choices about their body. And more on that will be coming out. I'm still working on language in that bill and working with groups, pro-reproductive rights groups on that bill. And then the last two things that I'll mention, because I don't want to take up too much more of your time, is climate change solutions. We still have to deal with the fact that our climate is changing and that our earth is changing, and we have to do something about it. And so, at the state level, there are things that can be done. one of the things I'm working on is the fact that the governor and many others were really excited to announce that they're going to be building these Rivian electric trucks here in Georgia, and that's great. You know, I do support climate change solutions coming to Georgia and climate change jobs coming to Georgia. But one of the things that they did not mention is the fact that here in Georgia, they will not be able to sell those cars. They will not be able to sell those trucks here in Georgia because there is some tension between dealerships and direct to order places like Rivian and Tesla that disallows that from happening. So the reason why you can buy a Tesla here in Georgia is because there was a specific carve out from the law that allowed Tesla to be able to sell Teslas here in Georgia. That only applies to Tesla, does not apply to any other electric car manufacturer. And so I would like to change that, because I think if we're really going to say that we're about climate change jobs and climate change solutions, we should do it all and not just pick the parts that are pro-business, but not actually pro-consumer. And so there's that. And then lastly, as always, I have always been a champion for voting rights, and I will continue to be a champion for voting rights. I will continue to look for ways to push back against the anti-voting bills, but a lot of that is really going to be done in the committee rooms and on the chamber floor through speeches and things like that. There are some legislative things that we can also push for. But right now, unfortunately, because of the political climate, most of those bills probably will not see the light of day. But we will still have to fight very hard for the remaining voting rights that we have here in the state, and to push back against anything, and then continue to push for federal legislation that can also help us. But for right now, the federal government is not saving us, so we got to do what we can here in Georgia. And so that is where I will conclude. Thank you again so much for having me and allowing me to present this legislative preview. I am more than happy to take any questions.
Hey, Jasmine, can I do something? Can we make a little request before we circle back to questions? Would that be okay?
Sure.
So here's what feels really important on this day about having Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark, who's really here to get us ready for the legislative session. This also happens to be the very last day she can raise money before tomorrow. And she is spending that afternoon with us. And so here is what we would like to ask you to do. Mary Lou has just dropped in the chat the donation link to Jasmine's website. Starting tomorrow, all through the session, she can raise not a dime. So it would break my heart if she spent her last afternoon of possible fundraising here with us and didn't get some money raised. So if you guys have been on Zoom enough that you know you can click on that link and you can just, it doesn't close down the Zoom. If those who are in a position to donate any amount, little or small, we would be so very grateful on Jasmine's behalf if you could go and donate it. Thank you so much. And let me also say before kicking it back to Jasmine, that we are also, we will be doing some postcarding that will really start probably in the next 2 weeks for Jasmine. And so we're going to be sending out an announcement of that, and hope you guys will all keep your eyes open. On that note, I'm going to just pull one question from a couple of questions from the chat while other people go and donate. So Jasmine from Lubus, would you please comment on the effects in Georgia of the Republican Party's strategy to take over local election boards?
So that's a really good question. And it was one that honestly, during the debates about SB 202, the one that got swept under the rug quite a bit. And the reason why is because most of the time when Republicans go after voting rights, they go after voter registration or they go after your ability to vote at the ballot box. And this time they got a little more crafty and they went after election administration. And the reason why it got swept under the rug is not because it wasn't important, it was because most people just didn't understand it. It was a brand new hill to climb, a brand new like subject matter that we really hadn't had to push back on in so long. So since then, we have had situations where the Republicans have tried to get the ball rolling on taking over boards of elections. We're seeing that in Fulton County, where they have basically, said, you all have had mishaps in the past, and these mishaps are the reason why we need to take over now. And it's really, there's a process. So the SB 202 didn't make it to where they could just walk in and say, everybody get out, we're in here now. Like, luckily, so far, that's not the way it has to be done. There are several steps in place, but they are going through those steps. And so we have to keep an eye out on how this process goes. We do have Sarah Tyndall Gazal on our state board of election, and she is an amazing advocate for election rights. And so I have full confidence that she will fight as hard as she can to push back against some of these things. But at the same time, yes, we do still have to be mindful that these takeovers can happen. Another way they've taken over election boards is actually a little bit more insidious because most people don't know it's happening. They've done it legislatively. They have gone in and drawn up legislation, local legislation, that changes the makeup of their election boards. And they have used this legislative process to kick out members of the election board that they do not like, and to put in people that are going to do their bidding and do some pretty nefarious things. So for example, in Lincoln County, Lincolnton, Georgia, which is near Augusta. And the only reason I know that is because my grandfather used to preach in Lincolnton, Georgia. Lincoln, Georgia, they replaced their election board, and then one of the first decisions that the election board decides is we're going to close down all seven of the voting precincts, and we're just going to have one central location. This is in rural Georgia. It's a large expanse of land. So we're talking about a lot of miles from one end of the county to the other. There is no public transportation. And if a person doesn't have a vehicle, you have now put them in a position where they could be much farther away from their voting precinct than they previously were. So this is the consequence of these election board takeovers, whether it be the legislative process where they just change the election board, or whether it be through this Secretary of State process where they go in and pretty much take over the election board because of them saying that the election board is not, or the election administration is not doing a good job. I hope that answered the question.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine. And that we should probably put a pause in it there. Any last things? I know that we folks are still donating. We'll be doing postcards for you starting in the next 2 weeks, and we'll send the information about that out. Anything else you need from us in the next near future, the near period of time?
So the thing about it is this session is probably going to be pretty contentious. And this session is going to have a lot of situations where we probably need a lot of grassroots voices, either down at the Capitol or inside of the inboxes of representatives on a number of issues. And so my only ask of Necessary Trouble is to be ready to get on the horn and contact legislators. And if you have the ability to come down to the Capitol on a lot of these really important issues. I know that sometimes it feels like you do so much and then things get passed anyway. But I'm here to tell you that your voice still does matter, even if it doesn't always feel like it does. Gwinnett County saw an example of that when we stopped those really bad bills from getting passed in the special session. Your voice does work. It's not going to always, you're not always going to get the outcome that you want, but please know that they're listening. And right now we're in an election year. And because we're in an election year, they're really listening, because they don't want to ruffle too many feathers when it comes to getting votes in November. So your voice matters. And so I'm just saying to just kind of be mindful. If I could reach out to you all and say, hey, this is something that is going on, do you mind sending out emails to people? It would be really nice to have Necessary Trouble, because you all show up and your voices really are powerful.
Thank you, Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark. You are awesome, and we are your foot soldiers. So just let us know. Can we just do a little, without unmuting, just a little huge gratitude to Jasmine for all of her service and her dedication and her clarity and her wisdom, and for spending her last afternoon of possible fundraising here with us. Jasmine, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. I always appreciate you all.
And we love you. And I want to make a little pitch before I give this back to PJ. Aquaria Richardson Smith is going to be coordinating the tracking of our legislation for this session. We're really grateful she's doing it. She would love some help. So some of you have already offered in your areas of expertise to track the key bills that are being passed. We would love it if anybody's willing to do that with healthcare, with reproductive rights, or with gun safety. So if you are willing to track legislation, doesn't have to be deep reading of these bills. Track the key pieces that are in those categories. Please put your name in the chat and we will get in touch with you. And huge gratitude to Aquaria, who is going to be keeping us all posted about what's coming down the pike also. And I am going to turn this over to PJ.
Thank you, Becky. Representative Dr. Clark, we want to thank you so much for your presentation. I attended the legislative Zoom that you all had yesterday morning. So a lot of this information that you're giving us is great information about what they're doing in the legislature. One thing I'd like to ask though, I noticed I went on your site to make a donation. Do you do the PayPal? There's no PayPal. But there's no paper. Okay, I will donate. I'll just have to get I don't have my information right here. Okay, I just wanted to know.
I apologize.
That's okay.
ActBlue collects the information I need for filing. So
okay.
That's why I don't have it on PayPal.
Okay, all right then. That's just usually how I do that. No problem. Okay, thank you so much again. At this time, I would like to turn the discussion over to Ms. Robin Shanar. She is the head of our criminal justice. Sorry, Robin. Criminal justice team. And she has a report this evening on the work that this committee is doing, the legislative process in criminal justice reform. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Robin.
Thanks, PJ. And PJ already knows what I'm going to say because she is part of the criminal justice reform team and has been working hard on what we've been doing. So on behalf of her and other team members who I'll mention later, we have some good news to report. So first of all, just taking a step back, the criminal justice team started working on the co-responder project about a year ago. A co-responder project is when police go out to an emergency call that is arising from a mental health situation or addiction, drug, alcohol abuse, or developmental disability. Typically, police are going out without any assistance. They are not equipped to handle those situations. They often escalate. And I don't know if you all remember Rayshard Brooks in June of 2020, who was murdered by an officer in a situation where it was completely unnecessary. And co-responder programs respond to this. So what they do is they pair up a behavioral health provider with an officer to go respond to emergencies that are arising out of behavioral health issues. And I use the term behavioral health because it, under the state of Georgia, it incorporates the mental health, the addiction, and the developmental disability. So the team a year ago decided, these programs are working in a handful of locations in Georgia, and we wanted to see if we could get them to be implemented statewide. And the goal was to create legislation that would be introduced in the 2022 session, which starts tomorrow, that would make it a statewide program. And we are on track to do that. So let me see what I want to tell you here. A few things I want to say about the bill that we've written. So there's 3 components to it, and I think all 3 are really important to making it work well. One is at the emergency level, how that you're going to have a team go out to respond. Okay, that's the basic piece of it. The second piece, which I think is equally as important, is that there will be a follow-up afterwards by the behavioral health provider with the person who had an emergency to see what services they need, get them hooked up, and try to avoid having the person in an emergency situation again. And the third piece is jail inreach, where the mental health providers will be looking at people who are incarcerated now, who may be better served in a behavioral health setting as opposed to a criminal justice setting. All of the behavioral health work under the bill would be done by the civil service board structure. The civil service boards are basically created by the state, and they cover regions, or about 25 of them, each over a certain region. And so each community service board would provide the partnership for the public safety offices in their region, and then would provide all the follow-up services. And the funding is in the bill for all of this. And the funding is decided by the state. So it would not be an unfunded mandate if the state does not fund it, or to the extent that they do fund it, that's how much the services will be provided. And our hope is the legislature is talking a lot about the importance of mental health, and our hope is that they will step up and fund it. They have actually more money this year than they normally do. So anyway, so I want to give a shout out to people from Necessary Trouble who have been part of this. So PJ, Lauda, I think I saw Lauda, Ted Golden has been amazing. Philippa, Linda Gooding, Denise Miller, Sandra Menes, Michael Andrews, and Carol Kursky has been really sort of just huge in all of this. This is actually her brainchild. So our team has grown. And so we are now basically referring to ourselves as just a bipartisan group of volunteers. We don't have an official name for ourselves when we were working with the legislature. But we are known. I mean, the legislation is known. And so what I want to do is, this has sort of been an exciting part of this week, is to play you a clip. Who is handling the?
I am, Robin.
Becky.
I'm
Okay,
about, you ready?
Yeah, so this week, this is a press conference by Lieutenant Governor Duncan, and you will hear that he has made this bill one of his priorities.
Give me a minute here.
Yep.
Becky, do I need to turn off the spotlight?
Nope, we're fine.
Turmoil, I think, we now look up 12 months later and continue to reinforce the fact that we ran fair, legal elections here in the great state of Georgia. So as I think ahead to this next upcoming session, there certainly will be no shortage of issues to talk about and issues to deal with. And like the previous 3 sessions, I want our office, the Lieutenant Governor's office, to continue to be a steady hand inside the legislative process, to continue to build consensus between Democrats and Republicans, urban and metro and rural folks and senators and legislators. I want to work across geographic boundaries, because at the end of the day, if we're going to put policy over politics, we've got to make sure that we continue to build consensus. One of the top priorities that we're going to put forward here tackles a very bipartisan issue here in the great state of Georgia, and that's crime. Crime is a bipartisan issue, and crime and being able to take a big step towards pushing back this wave of crime is going to take a bipartisan solution. And so I'm going to continue to push hard to pass what we're calling the Less Crimes Act, law enforcement strategic support. And this is an opportunity for us to work together to laser focus taxpayer dollars directly to local law enforcement via a tax credit program that's very similar to the rural hospital tax credit that I had a great opportunity to craft and work with when I was in the State House. These dollars are going to arrive at their local law enforcement agencies through various mechanisms, whether it be the foundation or other means, that are going to allow these law enforcement agencies to be able to laser focus those dollars to either hire more officers, pay them more, train them better, or buy better equipment for their officers. And one that I'm very, very excited about, a fifth component, is going to allow them to be able to either maintain or stand up a co-responder model that's going to allow us to be able to dovetail law enforcement and behavioral health experts that we've seen work throughout the state in various communities, like Forsyth County, where I'm from. So just imagine the difficult intersection of a potential crime being committed by somebody who's suffering from a mental health episode, and that law enforcement officer being in the impossible position to try to play the part of a behavioral expert. Now we're going to have the opportunities for them to be able to work better with the law enforcement agencies to better handle that situation. The Less Crimes Act is going to be carried by Senator Larry Walker, who's been a great friend and ally of mine.
So, yay, right. So it's been, I sort of ran around on cloud nine for a while. As a point of clarification, the Less Crimes Act will be separate from the co-responder legislation. What's cool about the Less Crimes Act is that of the five, so the money that comes in from that can be used for 5 different things, and one of the 5 is a co-responder program, okay? But then you have the separate bill, which is the co-responder program legislation. I know it's going to be introduced in the House by the head of the Health and Human Services Committee, Sandra Cooper, and I'm not sure who will be carrying it in the Sharon Cooper. I don't know who will be doing it in the Senate, but we will keep you updated and let you know how you can be out there and help get it passed. But it's been really, really exciting to see the reception it's received. And there are a lot of people from Necessary Trouble who have helped to make this happen. And anyway, it's been a great effort. So thanks to all of you who've been helping, and thanks for others for your support.
And we want to thank you specifically, Robin, since I'm part of the committee, for your leadership, okay, and your patience and everything else that you put into this, okay? We want to really, really thank you for that. I'm very proud to be a part of that committee, okay? At this time, we're going to move on to the impact of redistricting in 2022. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Becky, who will introduce Ms. Janet Grant, the Vice Chair of Fair Districts, Georgia. Becky.
Thank you, PJ. Thank you. And also just a huge shout out to that team of criminal justice reform work group for getting that bill so far and getting it as one of the Lieutenant Governor's priorities. That is really mind-blowing work. So huge gratitude. And that segues really nicely for me into, I had asked PJ if I could introduce Janet, because I also wanted to take a moment and just acknowledge the phenomenal work of Fair Districts Georgia in this last redistricting session. Can we just pause, and even before Janet says a word, just do huge shout out. They just were so amazing. And we knew we might not be able to stop this freight train, but we have no idea how much worse it would have been without fair districts. And the only weapon we had was the bright spotlight of public opinion and watching, and fair districts used that and wielded it and amplified it. And they were at every hearing, and they gave testimony up one side and down the other, and they had data, and they were in the AJC over and over and over again, and they just rocked it. So huge gratitude to all of fair districts, most particularly all of you who are troublers and also in fair districts, and Janet for her leadership there. So Janet, I'm going to turn this over to you with all of our gratitude.
Great. Well, thank you, Becky. I didn't anticipate that. Wonderful introduction. Thank you. And near the end of my presentation, I'm going to talk about many of the troublers that have played such a huge role for us as well. So I'm going to bring up my slides. So what I want to do this afternoon is give you all a sense of what really happened. Hang on one second. Let me get your pictures out of the way so I can see the slides. What really happened, where we are, and some of the things that that we need to continue to focus on. Redistricting is a once in a 10-year piece, but there's pieces that we still need to focus on, in particular coming out of this special session. So first of all, let me just in a nutshell tell you what happened during the special session if you did not follow it as closely as some of us did. So in essence, the Republicans proposed maps. They were in the position to be able to propose the maps, given that they're the majority party. And for the most part, they were released at the very last minute and passed through both chambers with virtually no changes along party lines. As Becky said, we think that we like to think anyway that we did mitigate what happened, what was released, even though we didn't see changes after the fact. We do believe, and you'll see some of the information here when we get into the detail, we do believe that they could have been a lot worse. And so we like to think that we mitigated some of what happened here. A disappointing thing is that despite all of the population growth in Georgia, and we grew over 10%, over 1 million people, and all of that was in people of color, the past maps really do not reflect appropriately the increases within majority, minority, or Black majority districts. And you'll see some of the data here in a second. There were, different than in some of the past redistricting cycles, there were only 4 incumbent pairings, and they all happened in the House. Some of that is because we do have a number of members of the legislature on both sides of the aisle that are running for higher office. And so the Republicans were able to use that in order to have less pairings. Those pairings are 1 Democrat against Democrat pairing, and that is Shelley Hutchinson and Rebecca Mitchell up in Gwinnett County. And then 2 pairings that are Republican against Republican, and 1 pairing that has a Republican versus a Democrat. Governor Kemp, I see I have a typo here, sorry. Governor Kemp signed all 3 maps into law on December 30th. He took the maximum amount of time he could to do that, and I'll opine here in a second about why he did that. The maps are effective for the 2022 election. So one thing in some of the sessions that I've been doing lately, people are confused thinking that they have a different representative now if their district changed. And that's not true. Your elected representatives are your elected representatives through this year until the November election. And that's when they go into effect. As Representative Clark said, local redistricting is underway and will be approved here in the regular session. I'm going to give you a couple examples from that. And finally, I just want to point your attention, if you are interested in delving a little bit more into what the lines are, what your districts are, we do have a wonderful tool on our Fair Districts website that Karen McGowan worked with our consultant to develop. And so you can see in an interactive map, and there's a bit.ly here that you can access that. So let's go through the 3 maps. First of all, on the congressional map, again, we have 14 districts in Georgia, and that stayed the same. We did not increase or decrease in terms of the number of districts. And unfortunately, there are in this map, there will be 9 Republican leaning districts, 5 Democratic leaning districts. And as you know, currently we have 8 Republican and 6 Democrat. And we'll talk about the elephant in the room on that one in the next slide. Very concerning, there are 0 competitive districts on this map. So it really, solidly is 9 and 5. There are 2 Black majority districts, down from 4, and that is, again, disappointing. No change in terms of majority minority districts with 5. The biggest tool that we brought to this session was our relationship with Princeton, which again, shout out to Karen McGowan for really developing and managing this relationship with the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. This became a conversation with every legislator about what the Princeton grade was on these maps. So Princeton did grade this a C, given that we're kind of a swing state and that we had just gone from 9 to 8 in terms of Republican seats. So it could have been worse. Certainly could have been worse. The Democratic caucus did bring forward a map, and that map had been graded a B. So this is the, I love these pictures from the AJC. Give credit to the AJC for these pictures. This shows you really what happened in terms of the 6th and 7th district, which is where that flip is being played out. So the biggest statewide shift in terms of voters was in Congressional District 6. Ironically, CD6, which is where Lucy McBath is, was a population size that was almost exactly right on. And yet they moved 355,000 voters and moved this from a 54% Democratic lean district to 41%, and minority population from 42 to 33%. Which is why she made the decision she made to look at a different district, because this makes it solidly a Republican district. And then with CD7, it moved it. This was the district that had the largest amount of population that did need to be moved. It was, in fact, the largest, 94,000 over what the ideal size for a district was, the largest of any district in the United States. And that moved to be a heavily Democratic leaning. So moving from 53%, kind of in that swing level, competitive level, to a 63% Democratic lean, and minority population from 59 to 67. So that's what really happened and has set up now the competition that we have in CD7. So on the Senate map, here we've got 33 Republican and 23 Democratic leaning districts. Currently, we have 34 Republican and 22. So the Republicans wanted to get credit for the fact that they were actually giving up a district. And in fact, we felt that there should have been many more districts moved into the Democratic column here. There is only one competitive district, and this is Michelle Au's district up in Gwinnett area, which is prompting her to leave the Senate and run for a House seat, an open House seat up in that area. Again, 14 Black majority districts, up one here. But no change in terms of majority minority. This was the worst graded map from a Princeton perspective with an F. And on the flip side, the Democratic caucus map that had been proposed was graded an A. On the House side, we've got 98 Republican and 82 Democratic leaning districts, a change from 103 and 77. So a pretty significant number in this map are already identified to move to Democratic leaning. However, we were upset to see so few competitive districts. We probably should have seen at least double this number of competitive districts. And I've got in the right-hand corner here where those competitive districts, and you can see on the map, like this district here, 128, down here, 151. And then along the edges of the metro area, here down in Henry County and up here in the Fulton, northern Fulton, Gwinnett areas are where the competitive districts are. 49 Black majority districts up from 47, and 76 majority minority districts up from 73. So again, this could have been so much worse, and in fact was graded a B, the best grade that that Princeton gave any of our maps. And the Democratic Caucus map was kind of the flip side of this and was also graded a B. So what happened then since signature? As I said, the governor signed these into law on the 30th of December and waited as long as he could, I think, because he knew that lawsuits were going to drop and wanted to give less time for those to get traction prior to qualifying coming in March and preparing for the 22 elections. So there were 3 lawsuits filed immediately, and then another one that was just filed the end of last week. All of these are in the U.S. District Court and allege either Voting Rights Act or U.S. constitutional racial gerrymandering allegations. And you can see kind of who's on first for these. Mark Elias, or the Democratic Party, is on first. The National Redistricting Alliance is on first for the first one. ACLU, NAACP with the Lawyers Committee, Common Cause is the latest one that was just filed the end of last week. And we believe there will be at least one more. The Mark Elias group looks like they are going to file one also on the state legislative maps. So we believe we're going to have at least 5 pieces of litigation going forward. So let me shift real quick just to talk a little bit about local redistricting. Again, Jasmine spoke to this. So there was this rule passed, law passed back in 2019 that it was called the Home Rule, which is a little ironic. Essentially what it does is allows local municipalities, county commissions, school boards, etc., to propose their own maps, but then it requires the LCRO, which is the Office of Redistricting in the legislature, to review and approve those. And then it requires legislative approval. So that whole piece had been delayed because of the census delays and special session delays. And all of that is going to be happening here during the regular legislative session. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, I probably did not understand the importance of local redistricting until we saw what happened during the special session up in Gwinnett. And we had, you know, a proposal from a sole Republican legislator in Gwinnett that would have, you know, changed significantly the county commission seats and moved the school board elections to be nonpartisan, which would move it from a November election to a May election. And think about who comes out for a May election versus a November election. So that was defeated. However, we anticipate some of those proposals to come back, and we need to be really diligent about what else is out there across all these different municipalities. So just keeping our eyes on this and advocating then at the local levels for transparency, for public input, for fairness, and honoring communities of interest. So here in DeKalb County, I've been involved, and some of you have as well, in looking at what's happening with the county commission redistricting. So DeKalb grew by over 72,000 over the last decade. And they moved forward with redistricting in a very non-transparent way. 2 public meetings were announced, but very kind of slyly, and I don't think there's anything nefarious here, but there was no attempt for the public to really know about these hearings or meetings. And they were held in early December. A few of us testified or made comments, public comments in those hearings, asking for transparency, for lower deviation in terms of the districts, et cetera. And yet the Board of Commissioners essentially went forward and approved their proposed maps and sent them to the LCRO for review on December the 21st. You can look at the interactive map. I made a bit.ly for this. Again, it has not been publicly really posted anywhere. And see what, see what is being planned and what the changes are in relation to DeKalb County. Some of us attended, I know some of you did as well. Our DeKalb delegation had a town hall yesterday and is going to do another one on Tuesday. And they specifically talked about the role that they will be playing in terms of oversight related to this process. So it's not done, but this is where it stands today. Just want to shout out, and again, I think I'm speaking to the choir here, about the importance of the U.S. Freedom to Vote Act passing. This, in addition to lots of important things related to voting rights, does have some really important language around redistricting. And you can see it does things like banning partisan gerrymandering, banning mid-cycle redistricting, which is a particular issue here in Georgia, et cetera. And so, again, just as you're reaching out to your elected officials, even if they're people that support the Freedom to Vote Act, they need to hear from us, continue to hear from us how important this is. And importantly for us, especially for this CD6 and CD7 issue, this would apply retroactively to our congressional plan. So it could help address what happened here in special session. So a big shout out to lots of troublers that are on our Fair Districts team. As Becky said, we had a lot of people down at the Capitol every single day. We had what we called our Gold Dome team, and we were down there every day, and we had people testifying in every single hearing. Multiple folks stepped up. You can see some of the troublers here, and see Senator Cowsert here with piles of postcards in front of him. The very first hearing we went to, there he was bringing in piles of postcards, and then made a comment in his opening comments about the public being engaged and communicating with them with all of these postcards. So a huge shout to Pam Woodley, who led our postcarding effort for the special session. So in terms of next steps, just the things that I mentioned: passing the Freedom to Vote Act, supporting litigation. Fair Districts will be looking at ways that we could potentially support litigation. We're not people to come forward or drive litigation, but we certainly can be supportive. We'll be, during this next regular session, continuing to pursue redistricting reforms. And then a really important thing, that a role that the troublers can play, is we need to organize and get out the vote to mitigate these redistricting impacts. And that's definitely on all of our agendas for 2022. And then continue to follow Fair Districts. We have a town hall that we're planning for January 31st. And at that session, we'll be talking more about priorities for 2022 and ways that you can get involved. So with that, I will stop sharing and see if I have even a minute to take any questions. Any questions? I don't know, Becky.
I think you got a minute if there's maybe
Okay.
one question, huh?
Yeah, we're doing good.
it kind of looks like just gratitude, Janet.
Okay, I'll take
Maybe-
that. Thank you.
Maybe we could all just do a little huge gratitude and shout out to these folks.
Great report, Janet.
Thank you.
Great work, great
Back-
work.
And back to PJ.
Okay, again, Janet, thank you so much. Thank you, Becky, for your help there. Now we move on to the electoral races and candidate recruitment in 2022. Becky, let's see.
And actually, Pam, we're gonna give this to Pam Woodley to manage. Pam, this
Right,
is
okay.
yours.
All right. Okay, yes, I am going to be giving an overview of the 2022 elections, and then I'm going to pass it to Gracie Fleming, who I will introduce at that time. So next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So, well, actually, if you go back one. So I'm going to be speaking in general. You know, there are some exceptions to what I'm saying, but in general, in odd years, we just have municipal elections, so just city councils and things like that. And so that was last year. And that's why there's really no primaries. There are elections, you know, every quarter, but those are special elections for people that have died or resigned or otherwise left their seats. The main election is just in November for all these city council seats because they're nonpartisan. So we don't need a primary to choose who is going to be on the Democratic or Republican ticket. In even years like this one, these are the big years because there's everything else. And there are primaries because the two major parties need to determine who will be on the tickets representing their party in November. Next slide, please. So this year, what's going to be on the ballot is all these statewide seats, including our one U.S. Senate seat, of course, Raphael Warnock's seat, and governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, these secretaries of labor, agriculture, insurance, and education. And then every congressional seat, all 14 of them, every Georgia Senate seat, all 56 of them, and every Georgia House seat, all 180 of them. And these are the seats that have been impacted by redistricting. So a lot of incumbents, especially in the House, where we have, all the districts are pretty tiny, a lot of incumbents will be running in new districts for 2023. I mean, on the November ballot, they will be in a new district, like even Becky Evans will no longer be in her current district by number. She's got a new number. So that's something to be aware of, although they're like Janet said, they're all staying the same this year. And then we will have about half of the county commissioners and school boards. The other half is in 2024. And about half of the district attorneys, sheriffs, and solicitor generals, the other half in 2024. And about half of the judicial seats. And these are different because they're nonpartisan. So they will be, those judicial elections will be in May, and they will be, at the primary time, and they will be final at that time, except for any runoffs. They will not be on the ballot in November. Next slide, please. So I've learned so much about elections working on this candidate directory, everybody. It's been a lot of fun. I've really learned so much about it. But a big week for us is going to be qualifying week, which is March 7th through 11th. And that's when all the candidates that want to run on either the Democratic or Republican Party, under their banner, they need to qualify with the party. So they go down to the Capitol. All the Democrats are sent to one room. All the Republicans are sent to another room. They pay a small fee, like $400, and they present some affidavits to their party. And then the party, basically checks them out a little bit if they're an unknown quantity, and then sends the list of the qualified candidates to the Secretary of State, and that determines who will be on the primary ballot. All the third party candidates like libertarians and independents and so on, they are not in the primary. They will appear on the ballot in November, and they're able to qualify later. Also, interestingly, they, since they're not qualifying with a party, nobody's really checking them out. They're the ones that have to get signatures from their district, and a lot of signatures. I mean, it's a pretty big barrier to running as a third party candidate. Next slide. So these are the key dates for 2022. So first, we're going to have the primary in May. And you can see the various timeframes of when you'll be able to apply for an absentee ballot for the May 24th election. When is the last day to register to vote? Early voting they allow about 3 weeks for that. Under SB whatever that 220 was, every county has to have 2 weekends with mandatory Saturday voting. So that's when those are, and the optional Sunday voting. So that will vary by county, whether there's Sunday voting on those 2 Sundays or not. Then the election is May 24th, and the runoffs will be June 21st. And then for November 8th, everything's just backed up from November 8th. Last day to register will be October 11th. Early voting, again, about 3 weeks. October 17th, you've got your 2 Saturday votings and optional Sunday voting, then the election in December and the runoffs in December 6th, on December 6th.
November.
So I would like to turn it over to Gracie Fleming at this point. Gracie is the partnerships manager of a national organization called Contest Every Race, and they are working closely with our candidate directory as a tool to do what they do, which she will tell you about.
Thank you so much, Pam, and thanks to all of you for being here today on a Sunday. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about who Contest Every Race is and what we do, how we've been working in Georgia in the past, and how we plan to do it in 2022. Can I get screen sharing privileges so I can share my screen? Great, thank you so much. Just make sure I got the right tab up here. So I'm going to run through a bit of our slide deck, talk about who we are and what we do and how y'all can potentially work with us. And then after that, we'll take any questions you all have. So Contest Every Race. We are an organization that partners with state Democratic parties and movement and labor allies to recruit people to run for office, specifically in seats where no Democrat would be running otherwise. The reason we do this is because we have estimated that there are over 500,000 elected offices in the United States, and Democrats are not competing in up to 75% of them, which is an insane amount. Often the races that are uncontested are down ballot races, but y'all know, and I know in my state in Missouri, as well as your state, Georgia, that it's often those state legislature races as well, where there's no Democrats running. So we are trying to fix this problem and get this number down, not only for the state legislature races, but for the special districts, for school board races, where we're not only affecting good government, but we're building the bench. So why is it important to contest every race? Like I just said, it's really important for good governance. I know this past year has shown me that kids and teachers are as safe as their local school districts board are, and the policies they're enforcing around COVID. And that's just one example of many. We also run randomized control trials for each state that we work in, and we find that investing in down ballot races helps turnout for Democrats, as well as favorability for the Democratic Party. And of course, we're building the bench. When we're helping candidates run at the local level, it's more likely that we're going to maybe have a good candidates in 2 or 4 years for a higher level state legislative race, or maybe even something bigger. So how does our program work? The first thing we do is we find uncontested races. So in most states we work, Contest Every Race is the only organization doing research really similar to the candidate directory. So normally we have a research team and volunteers that are conducting research to figure out where incumbents are up, their party affiliation, what have you. We are so lucky in Georgia to have the necessary trouble folks and folks with the Campaign Directory Project that do this research for us. So we use the research that is created through the Campaign Directory to run our program. Once we get the research from you all, we work with both the Democratic Party and partner organizations to figure out, where anyone across the coalition that we work with has a candidate. And then we are only going to recruit for places where no Democrat would be running otherwise, or no activist or no labor ally. For those seats that will be left uncontested, if we don't try our hardest to get someone in there, we text basically every Democrat in the voter file, plus members of partner organizations. In the past, this has been organizations like Represent Georgia, Black Voters Matter, Indivisible, MoveOn.org, the whole gambit. And I'm gonna say in a little bit who exactly those partners have been. So we're gonna text people from the voter file and our partner organizations and ask if they're interested in running for office. If they tell us they're interested in running, we are going to continue to send them texts until the filing deadline or until qualifying. We're going to tell them how they need to qualify, what the fees are, if they need any petitions, and we're going to connect them to trainings and resources, but also local leaders. Sometimes it's the county party chair or whomever from the partner organization we're working with, whoever their point of contact is. So that's kind of the gist of how our program works. So when it comes to the impact of our program, we have been around for almost 4 years now. And in that time, we have found 120,000 people nationally that have said they're interested in learning for running for office. Often the narratives we heard are, people that have never attended a Democratic Party meeting or an Indivisible meeting, but they're really fed up with how their kids' school's being run, or they're just fed up with how their local government's being run, and they're motivated and inspired to take a stand. Of those 120,000, 3,500 have actually officially filed to run for office, and 45% of those that we've recruited across the board have actually won their elections. So these aren't just lambs going out to slaughter, but we are recruiting Democrats to run for what maybe historically has been considered an unwinnable seat, and they're winning. On top of this, 70% of our recruited candidates are women or people of color. In Georgia, we have worked with the Democratic Party of Georgia and partner organizations for going on our 4th year now. And in the first 3 years, we have recruited 270 candidates to end up qualifying to run for office, and 73 of them have won their elections. So in every state we run, in every state we work in, we run randomized control trials where we randomly select a control group where we don't text them. And then we measure the impact of our program for people that do versus don't receive our texts. We have found that people we text are 50% more likely to run for office than those who don't receive our texts. On top of this, this is a Georgia specific randomized control trial. We found that in Georgia in 2019, uncontested races dropped by 17% when we ran our program. So those races on your ballot where Republicans are automatically getting elected or appointed, we're dropping those by 17%. So this is a little bit of a brief history of our program in Georgia. Like I said earlier, we have been working with Georgia since 2019. This is, we're going into our 4th year. Partnering with the Democratic Party of Georgia. And the way our program works is we text Democrats about running for office through the Democratic Party, and we run parallel texting programs with our partner organizations. So our standard and typical model is a partner organization will give us their list of members, and we will text their members in the organization's name, our texting sequence. So, we are a movement partner, but we functionally work as a vendor in this type of relationship. New Georgia Project is sending us their list of folks that live in areas that have an uncontested seat. We're texting those folks in the name of the New Georgia Project. So throughout this 3 going on 4-year partnership, the organizations we've worked with in this standard model are MoveOn.org, Run for Something, the National Democratic Training Committee, which are all national organizations, as well as locally, New Georgia Project, Black Voters Matter, Mi Gente, Indivisible, New American Leaders, and Represent Georgia. We'll also be working again with Represent Georgia coming in the 2022 election cycle. Now, that is our typical partnership model. We have a really special partnership with Necessary Trouble folks and the Candidate Directory Project, which we're really grateful for. Like I said at the beginning, the research that you all do is basically the most important part of our program, because without that research, we wouldn't know where Democrats are up, where Republicans are up, and we wouldn't know what seats need to be contested. I just want to reiterate that typically when we work in states, we are the only organization doing this research. And that I know of, you are one of the only organizations across the country that is doing this research in the way that we would do it if you all weren't here. So we are super excited that your organization exists and that you're doing this program because it's directly becoming kind of the infrastructure to our candidate recruitment program. So looking towards 2022, the contest every race, like the number of races we're going to potentially recruit for nationally is 66,000. So that's 66,000 races across all the states we're looking at. But that number is going to get lower once we figure out where there's already candidates and which races that we don't need to recruit for versus which races would be uncontested if we didn't recruit. In Georgia, we have already gone through the process of figuring out which seats have candidates for both county and state legislative races, and which seats won't have a candidate if we don't try our best to get someone. And there is 431 races in Georgia that we are going to be recruiting for. So going back to the statistic that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, we leave on average 75% of our races nationally uncontested. So what could those numbers be? If we don't have our program and if work isn't done to get butts in seats of Democrats and progressive folks running for local office, that could be 49,000 seats nationally where a Republican is automatically going to take a seat with little effort. And in Georgia, 323 seats. By running this program, we really hope that we're going to get those numbers way lower than they are now, because those are pretty scary numbers. So what can y'all do, to make those numbers go down? What can we do to make sure that we are getting good folks who share our values in local office and in state legislature races? Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that you can always run for office yourself, or you can encourage someone around you to run. I think that, the past few years have shown us that anyone can run for office. And my guess is that the folks in this space would be a lot better at running for office than some of the elected officials that we all know that we have that are just not doing a good job. On top of that, I think it's really important that we offer support to folks who are running. We forget, how many nuances there is in running for office, and how much stuff from door knocking to, training on how to use van. There's so many little details that go into someone running for office successfully that they need help with. The example I like to give is, cooking folks meals that are running for office or running campaigns in another way. Things like that, watching their kids, that can even help too. You don't even have to be the door knocker. And then lastly, I think that we often forget about the infrastructure and scaffolding that are changing our elections and that are helping candidates run. Organizations like Necessary Trouble and the Campaign Directory and Contest Every Race, we are behind the scenes and we don't always get, the praise and the thanks in the world for changing systems. But I think that we are equally as important as folks running for office, because like I said, we are the infrastructure and we're the scaffolding, and the work that we're doing behind the scenes is changing things and making a big difference. Working with Campaign Directory, volunteering with Campaign Directory, your research and your work is directly funneling in our candidate recruitment program. And outside of that, if research isn't your thing, Contest Every Race, our volunteers our texting of candidates is all done through volunteers. So if you're interested in kind of talking to someone one-on-one about the importance of running for local office that maybe hasn't considered it via text, let me know. I can put a contact in the chat that can help you with our texting services. And I'm sure folks here like Pam and Becky can tell you how to volunteer with the campaign directory program if that is more your cup of tea. So that is all I have for you all today. I would love to take any questions you have. And if you want to have a longer conversation with me, I've put my information on this slide. Thank you all.
So Gracie, I know that, I think, well, how many different states do you work with, first of all? Or is it all?
It's not all of them. I think we've worked with 26 states as of now, and we're all over the board. So I'm in Missouri, we're working in Missouri, we're working in California, in New York, and in Utah and Montana, because even the bluest of states have areas where no Democrats are running. So we found there's really no state that doesn't need this help outside of Oregon, because they run their own program like this internally. But outside of that, no one's really doing this type of work.
Okay, great. And I know Becky asked me to reiterate Gracie's call for volunteers. I think Martha Laird led a group last year that I was on. I think I get confused about all the groups I was on, but I think it was Martha, right? I wasn't actually involved in the texting, but a different set of volunteers did all these original texts. And then the respondents that got through a few screens and stuff, we actually called on the phone to talk to them about running and to tell them about the training available, because there are really great training programs in Georgia that we could steer them to. They're free, and just provide them support, because it is hard to run for office. It's really hard. So if any of you would be interested in hearing about that when the time comes, please put your names in the chat for either texting or calling. You could maybe specify if you only want to do one of those things.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I got a question about how are we funded. So we partner with organizations and the Democratic Party, and we try to make our services not a burden to them. For each state we work in, it costs us about $100,000 when we cover our staff time to run our program and the texting stuff. I would say 90 to 95% of our budget comes from private donors. So we have our own in-house development team. We have donors from across the country. We have some Georgia specific donors. And then our parent organization, Movement Labs, which is a progressive campaign consulting texting firm, they backstop our costs if we ever are short. Funding link, I will get you that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone is interested, just to know for the future, our website is justcontesteveryrace.com, and we got a donate button right at the top, but I will send that in the chat as well.
It is kind of amazing the response you all get, because last year, there were thousands of people on that list for us to call.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people, and it was interesting calling them.
Yeah. I always say that we play a numbers game. Just for example, last year in Washington State, we texted 500,000 people about running for office, and 20,000 said they wanted interest. So that 20,000 is still a huge number. Probably 0.5 to 1% of them actually ended up filing or said they want to file in the future. But we're just trying to skim the cream off the milk and figure out, what are the 20,000 we should be calling versus trying to tackle the entire voter file.
Exactly. And that's what you're kind of doing in the calls, which is why they're interesting. You're kind of trying to figure out if this person might be a good candidate or not. You ask them, how are you involved in your community, and, things like that.
Exactly. Any other final questions, folks?
Okay, I think we can turn it back.
All right, well, thank you all for having me. It was great to see and inspiring to see 58 people in this room on a Sunday evening. So thanks for
It's
having me.
raining here.
Fair enough.
Great. I want to thank Pam for this wonderful segment and all the great information that we got. And also thank you, Ms. Fleming. Okay. Now we would like to move on. You know, surprisingly enough, with all the information we've received today, we're pretty much on time. Yeah. So now I would like for Becky to give us a briefing on a necessary trouble in 2022 and about our
Thank you, PJ. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
That's great. That's great. And huge shout out of gratitude to both Gracie and Pam Woodley. Before we leave that topic altogether, I want to just reiterate that if anybody has not ever seen the candidate directory, there are links in the chat. It is a behemoth amount of information. And Pam Woodley has done an amazing job of coordinating the team of people working on that. And they always need help. Because we are updating it all the time and putting in social media information. And if you have any willingness to help with just some of that, some of that research, please put your name in the chat and we will follow up with you. So let me say a little bit about necessary trouble in 2022. And let me just say that what I'm going to describe are the things we know. And we also know that there is always something that is unpredictable. And so what I'm going to describe is kind of the outlines of our anticipated work around electoral and legislative work at different parts of the year, because the first part is going to be very different from the last part. So let me share my screen. And a shout out, as always, to Mary Lou McCloskey for taking care of our PowerPoints. Okay, so January to March. This is its own chunk of time. And there are a couple of things that are going to be going on that are in the forefront of our January to March quarter. And one of those is, the General Assembly. And the second is that there will be candidate qualifying during March 7th to 11th. And a lot of what's going to be going on during that time is legislative tracking and advocacy. And again, Aquaria Richardson Smith is going to be handling our tracking for us. During that period of time, in addition to the legislative advocacy, we're also going to be starting to do, we'd mentioned the postcards for Dr. Jasmine Clark. That's not actually primary cards that we're going to be doing. I think this is a brilliant idea of hers, and something we can do for her while she's in the session is it's going to be welcoming new voters into her new district. And so that's something that will be going on. There will also be candidate directory updating going on. There will also be, we'll be doing candidate recruitment through Contest Every Race. We will also be doing a project that will be ongoing with the Department of the Democratic Party of Georgia's voter protection team. Martha Laird is going to be describing that project. We've got a big chunk of troublers doing that. It's going to last all year, and it's going to start in January. We will, in an ongoing way, be doing voter education and registration with the DeKalb Dems and other partners. Karen Davenport is going to be talking about that in a minute. And we are going to begin our collaboration with the Abrams and Warnock campaign. And we're also going to be looking at any other candidates not in primaries that we can support. I want to say just a little minute about the tricky situation we're in, because the first part of the year, we are trying very hard not to wade into races where there are primaries. It's a minefield. And so we're going to be trying to, during this first part of the year, we're going to be trying to work on those campaigns where, like Warnock and Abrams, where the outcome is obvious, they already have our support, they are running, they will be the candidate, and we're going to try to stay away from some of those races where there are two good, strong Democrats. I mean, there are lots of races where we have very good Democrats running, but we have more than one. And so that's why we're going to be waiting until the primary to kind of decide which other races, which other candidates troublers are going to adopt. Last time we talked a little bit about doing a fundraiser for the Warnock campaign. After much conversation with them, they have very graciously let us know we probably can't raise enough money to make it worth Senator Warnock's effort and time, because he's doing so much all over the country. We may have an event with him and for him that is about strategy and engagement that would include fundraising. So we will keep you posted on that. Let me go to the next part of the year. Okay, April to May. So qualifying is over by that time. And at that time, we are aiming towards the May 24th primary. What does this look like for Necessary Trouble? It looks like the Voter Protection Project team continues doing their work with the DPG. Since there's a primary, we have a lot of troublers that do a lot of really good poll work and poll managing, and things like manning the voter protection hotline. Again, we'll continue our voter education with the DeKalb Dems and other partners. By that time, we will be much deeper into the campaign work with Abrams and Warnock. And at that time, we will also begin to decide after the primary which candidates Necessary Trouble will be adopting. And we'll be looking at this the way we have in the past. Where can we be most effective? Who really needs our help? And where is there a really key and important district? Okay, then we get into June and November. A couple of the things we've already been doing, the Voter Protection Project continues, the poll work continues, our campaign work with our partner continues, and at that time we dive deep into campaign work. By that time, in addition to Abrams and Warnock, we will have our troubler adopted candidates, and we will also be just trying to turn out support for the whole team of the Democratic slate. So let me go now on to the last part of the year, which is we're starting to get into November and December. Key events are, there we go. So June through November, the primary is over. And at that time, we're starting to have this period of time between the primary and the general election. So still the same things that we have been doing: voter protection, poll work. At this point, it becomes campaign work with the DeKalb Dems and other partners. And we are pushing as hard as we can for Abrams, Warnock, our troubler candidates, and the Democratic slate. And then after November 8th, we're still doing the voter protection work, and we are working our hearts out for whoever has ended up being the Democrat in the runoff. And we always expect that there will be runoffs. And so that's what it looks like. And that's the kind of general outline of it. In terms of electoral and legislative work. I also wanted to say something about what's going to be, and at every stage, we will be recruiting, as you guys know, we'll be recruiting help volunteers of various, to help with various pieces of this work. I also want to say we have something very exciting that is going to be going on at the same time. And let me share my screen again for the dates. We've been really fortunate, and we've gotten a grant from the National Indivisible to do a couple of trainings. And we have found a wonderful diversity, equity, and inclusion training, Angelique Burke. And Angelique is a therapist. She is a trainer. She lives and breathes to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Both Martha Laird and I have had long conversations with her. We believe that she will be a really wonderful match for Necessary Trouble, and helping us look at the ways that we partner across differences. She will be doing the first large training on Sunday, February 27th from 1 to 4, and it is only for troublers. It's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion 101. And then the second one will be at the end of March for those folks who want to do a deeper dive. And she's lovely. She's lovely. She's a therapist, so she knows how to hold very wise, good, strong, safe space. She's passionate, she's lively, she's fun, and we are really looking forward to having her work with us. And it will probably, our hope and her hope is that she'll be working with us in a really ongoing, long-term way, and this will be the beginning of it. So at the first time that we have a way to sign up and register for that, I want to encourage as many of you as can to join us there. And in the meantime, hold that last Sunday in February and the last Sunday in March. That's all I got. Anybody have any questions? It looks like Mary Davis knows Angelique too. Wonderful. And she's a meditator. How lovely. That's wonderful. Anybody have anything else before I pass this back to PJ? Doesn't look like it. So here we go, big year, heavy lift. We do it all together. We do it with lots of love and lots of fierceness and lots of hard work. So let me turn this back to PJ.
Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you so much. It looks like we're going to be really, really busy. Martha?
Oh,
Did you have something to say?
no, sorry. I was just getting.
Oh, okay. Not yet. Okay. Okay. At this time, I want to do the updates for Necessary Trouble working committees. And I'd like to introduce at this time, Karen Davenport. Karen is the chair for the GOTV DeKalb Dems. Karen?
Thank you, PJ. Can you let me share my screen for just a minute? Becky went over very, very clearly what many of our goals are and how we hope to work with the troublers. I really want to give a shout out. There's so many people on here who are part of our team, with our Get Out the Vote team in the DeKalb Dems. So this year, our focus is to really, really touch. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Let's see. Let me see what I'm doing here. Okay. Our focus this year is to touch every Democrat that is in DeKalb County. And we are planning to do this through several different ways. Barb Sorensen, who is on this call, who heads our precinct captain task force. One of the main things that we want to do is increase the number of precinct captains that we have in DeKalb, because we have found through our research that personal connections make the biggest difference in helping people understand why it's important to vote. So one of our primary goals, there's lots of different ideas we have here that we'll be discussing with our actually with our team of precinct captains and block captains and House district chairs as to ways that we can touch all of the Democrats in DeKalb County, because we want to really, really help people understand how voting for Democrats makes their lives better. So I wanted to clearly kind of bring to your attention a couple of different ways that we really want the troublers to think about joining with us as we make this big effort to touch every Democrat in DeKalb. First of all, if you know any additional people that might be interested in working with us as precinct and block captains, please have them go to the DeKalb Dems website. And I think Mary Lou's going to put that in the chat. If they're interested in volunteering as an ambassador of truth, let me explain what this is about. There are lots of different ways that we want to touch Democrats, and we want to be very clear with our messaging so that we can inform them of all the things that have already happened by Democrats that have been elected. So we are looking for teams of people to work with us to help write text, as well as write clear information for possible canvassing, as well as send out clear information in mail outs. So that's something that some people might be interested in working with us. And also, as always, continue donating. So if you go on the DeKalb Dems website and you just sign up to volunteer, then you can easily, we can put you in where you might be interested. Thank you, PJ.
You're quite welcome, Karen. Thank you so much for that update. Now I want to go to Martha Laird. Martha?
Yes, great. Okay, I wanted to tell y'all about the voter protection project that came up on all of Becky's slides. Sarah Draper, the director of voter protection for the Democratic Party, has asked us as troublers to partner with them in doing this project. And what we would be doing is forming a group of year-long volunteers who would be collecting data from County Board of Elections staff periodically during the year that the Democratic Party needs in order to better support voters as they go to the polls and at least try to get their vote cast. So we would be a data collection group, and one that would be ensuring the right information is being shared with the counties. So right now we have about 28 people who are part of this effort, which is really great. Thank you, everyone. We can still take some more. So put in the chat if you'd be willing to do this. The key thing is it lasts from now till November. So it's almost a year-long commitment. You would probably have 5 or 6 counties that would be your counties. You could partner with someone else in doing this. Robert Brown and myself are the leaders of this effort and would be ready to answer any questions, give you support along the way. We'll probably be monthly gathering on Zoom so we can share what we have found out about the easiest way to do this or not. Some of you were doing this already last year when you called counties to find out where the drop boxes were. That's the kind of information we'll be doing on a regular basis. So what they decided, the Democratic Party decided, was that they needed people who were dedicated to this and experienced in doing this kind of data gathering. And that's why they are instituting this sort of year-long team. So put your name in the chat if you are interested in it. Our first meeting is next Sunday at 5 o'clock on Zoom. And we'll be making assignments, working on our first assignment will be, we were doing through the web, checking online what sites, Board of Elections sites actually are saying. And then later, maybe phone calling for different pieces of information. If you have any questions about this, come to the meeting and we'll go from there.
Okay. Martha, thank you so much.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have news for you. It is 5:50 and we are ahead of schedule. okay? And so,
Hey, PJ, can
yes,
before we end early, can I get one final minute to pitch for something? Okay, thank you, PJ. I realized, but we needed to squeeze a little bit more blood out of people before we managed to wrap things up. I want to pitch for two significant sources of help that we need. Connie Rose has been a champion in being our postcard coordinator for the last however many years we've been doing it, and she has been a heroic, and she is ready to pass the baton. And so we need a new postcard coordinator, and it's a fantastic job working with eager people. Connie will pass on all of her knowledge and her tips. And so if you would be willing to work with us to do some of the coordinating of our postcard efforts, or if you would even be willing to talk about that, please put your name in the chat. We have some new folks here. Even if you're new to this group, we would be just so grateful to have your help in that kind of support. And similarly, if you have any willingness to help us with our Facebook site, that would be something that we would be very grateful for. It doesn't have to be a deep level of expertise. And if anybody's willing to help with either of those, please put your name in the chat. And now I'm going to turn this back over to PJ. Thank you, PJ.
thank you, Becky. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for attending today. Thank you, everyone who presented something today. This was just a power-packed session. And so with that being said, I wanted to let you know that our next meeting will be February the 13th, 4 to 6 p.m. And again, I'd like to reiterate what Becky was telling us about our first diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And that will be February the 27th from 1 to 4. So everyone, thank you. Welcome back. We've got plenty of work to do this year, and have a great evening.
Thank you, PJ. Awesome
Yay,
meeting.
PJ.
Bye.